This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. I want to thank the Mardasra for inviting me to join you. It's a big kavod to be here at this Chashva Makam Torah, which, at least out of the shul, I know is gaining tremendous renown in no small measure to the Habratzas Torah of the Rav. And I want to wish the Rav personally tremendous bracha v'atzlacha and many years of gezint, al kisei mamlachtoi, Eretz Hashem for the whole kehila, lahagdil Torah ladira. So the Rav already gave the first tkiyos, so now the second tkiyos maybe are begeder la'arbe v'sasatan, depending on the lamdas. Okay, I want to speak a little bit divrei agada, but through the prism of divrei halacha, and also the inyan of tkiyas shofar. In Parshas Hashanah, the Moshe Rabbeinu speaks out the shvach of Klal Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu says like this: Ki mi goy gadol asher lo yelokim kroivim elav kashem elokeinu b'chol kareinu elav. Who is like the Rebbeinu Shalom? Who is like Klal Yisrael? That every time we call out to the Rebbeinu Shalom is close to us. So Moshe Rabbeinu is declaring, he's emphasizing that there's a unique quality of Klal Yisrael, that whenever Klal Yisrael calls out to Rebbeinu Shalom is always near to us. The question is, this is a question of the Brisker Rav and the Chidushei HaGriz al Torah. Here Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to pinpoint, he's trying to isolate, he's trying to identify the unique status of Klal Yisrael. How Klal Yisrael is different than all the Ummah Yisraelim. Kimi goy gadol. Who is like Klal Yisrael? And Moshe Rabbeinu, so to speak, picked the very worst way, it seems, in which Klal Yisrael is unique from all the Ummah Yisraelim. I mean, if you want to say Klal Yisrael is unique because we have tefillin, talis, mezuzah, Talmud Torah, okay, that makes sense. These are all mitzvahs that Ummah Yisraelim don't have. But which mitzvah does Moshe Rabbeinu pick? He picks the mitzvah of tefillah. That's the one mitzvah that the Ummah Yisraelim have. I mean, we're going to be saying in Slichos every day, Ki beisi beis tefillah yikarei l'chol ha'amim. Shlomo HaMelech, when he inaugurates the Beis HaMikdash, he says, and if a guy comes to this Makayim, Rebbeinu Shalom, please be makabel his tefillah. What do we find by Ninveh, says the Brisker Rav? Ninveh was mispalel to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and the Rebbeinu Shalom was makabel his tefillah. So here Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to identify the unique status of Klal Yisrael, and he picks the one mitzvah that we share in common with the Ummah Yisraelim. It's a pella. He could have picked any of the other 612. He picks the one mitzvah that Goyim are also shaykh to. Similarly, in Parshas Balak, where Bilam is speaking about the shvach of Klal Yisrael, remember I heard from Victor Miller, to find the shvach of Klal Yisrael, it's very few and far in between. Basically, nothing in the Torah gives us any compliments or accolades. Moshe Rabbeinu says two words, right? Ashreichem Yisrael. If you want to know about the shvach of Klal Yisrael, you have to look at the Divrei Bilam. So what does Bilam say? Hibid oven b'Yaakov, v'lo'ira amal b'Yisrael. Hashem doesn't see any iniquity in Klal Yisrael. He doesn't see any problems with Klal Yisrael. Hashem aleikav imay usruas melech bay. We have Sruas Melech. So the question is, what does it mean Sruas Melech? What is the Sruas Melech? So Rashi says, what's Sruas Melech? Rashi says, Loshoin Chiba V'Reyos. Kama Reya David. Reya David means Oyev David, the friend of David. Or Vayitna L'Mereyehu. Says Rashi, Unklis Taiches, Ushchinas Malka Hein Veineon. In other words, Usruas Melech Boy means we have the friendship of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Maybe the Rebbeinu Shalom is the boyrei for the Ummah Yisraelim. Maybe he's the manhig for the Ummah Yisraelim. But the concept of surua, the concept of friendship, the concept of closeness, that the Ummah Yisraelim don't have with the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's what it means. Usruas melech bay. It seems like Bilam is makane. Bilam is saying, "Oy, if only, look at Klal Yisrael. Look what they have. Usruas melech bay. They have the friendship of the Rebbeinu Shalom." And yet, if you look in the Ibn Ezra, Ibn Ezra learns differently. The Ibn Ezra learns Usruas Melech. What does it mean, Usruas Melech? Says the Ibn Ezra, B'machane Yisrael, in the Jewish camp, V'zeh Usekatam Trua. So what is Ibn Ezra saying? L'chayra, what the Ibn Ezra means, Usruas Melech, is what is Bilam Makane? What is Bilam jealous of? What is aching Bilam's heart? What's he bothered by? He's bothered by the fact that Klal Yisrael has the mitzvah of Tkiyah Shofar. And again we could ask, of all the 613, that's what echoes Bilam. That's what he's bothered by. That's what hurts him. Not Talmud Torah, not Tefillin, not mezuzah, not tzitzis, dafka, tkiyah shofar. Why is this the one mitzvah that Bilam is so jealous of? In most shuls, the minhag is by tkiyah shofar that during the bracha, they take the shofar and it's put either in a zekel or in a bag or it's covered with a mappa, with a cloth. There's an inyan to cover the shofar at the time of the bracha. So the Avnei Nezer, in our Chaim Siman Tov Lamed Aleph, the Avnei Nezer wants to know, this minhag seems to be Keneged Halacha. Why? What's the reason for the minhag? L'chayra, somehow it comes from the pasuk, Tikabachai, the shofar, Bakesa, the shofar needs to be hidden. But says the Avnei Nezer, the minhag seems to be Keneged Halacha. Because we know, Kol mitzvahs mevarchin aleim oiver lasiyasan. Whenever you make a bracha on a mitzvah, you have to make the bracha immediately prior to the performance of the mitzvah. So you don't make the bracha on the tefillin when the tefillin is in the bag. You have to take out the tefillin, and that's still not enough. You put it on your arm, and you make the kesher just enough so that after you make the bracha, you tighten it. But to make the bracha while the tefillin are still in the bag, it's oiver la'oiver. It's too much in advance. It's a problem. You don't make a bracha on the talis when the talis is in the bag. You hold it ready to do the atifa, and you make the bracha immediately prior to the atifa. In fact, the Ranim Sachem says, if you were to have a mitzvah that there would be no way to make the bracha immediately over l'asiyasam, Chazal would not be masake in such a bracha. L'mashal, the Ran says, you make a bracha on Kedushei Kesef. There's no bracha on Kedushei Biyah. Why? Because to do immediately, it's lo yirvcha ebras davar. Elamai oiver lo oiver, Chazal are not masaki in such a bracha. Memel, they were never masaki in a bracha on that type of kedushin. So if you could find a situation where a bracha would not be over l'asiyasan, Chazal would never be masaki in the bracha to begin with. So frek the Avnei Nezer, what's pshat in this minhag? You take the shofar and you cover it. You're delaying the performance of a mitzvah, albeit a moment. But nevertheless, the minhag of covering the shofar, says Avnei Nezer, seems to be keneged the halacha. So Avnei Nezer says, a goinistic answer, maybe somewhat al pidrush, says a very interesting thing. If I were to ask you, what is the mitzvah of shofar? Famous chakira, what is the mitzvah of shofar? So we know the shita of the smag, mitzvah membez, says the smag, mitzvahs aseh litkaya. There's a mitzvah to blow the shofar. According to the smag, the mitzvah is to blow the shofar, which would mean, possibly, if you blow the shofar with your fingers in your ears, maybe you'd be yotzei. Or, for instance, the shultis, the mitzvah kuf ayin aleph. The mechayvis, Beis Yisrael, lemiska. Klal Yisrael is chayiv to blow. Or the Rosh brings b'shem Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam says, what's the bracha on tkiyah shofar? Al tkiyas shofar, says Rabbeinu Tam. And yet, I think we're all familiar with the shita of the Rambam. The Rambam could not write more times that the mitzvah is not to blow the shofar, the mitzvah is to hear the sound of the shofar. The Rambam writes no less than 7 times that the mitzvah is not to blow, the mitzvah is to hear. So even before the Rambam even discusses Hilchos Shofar, the Koiseres of the Rambam, the heading of the Rambam, is Mitzvahs Shmias Shofar, to hear the Shofar. The Rambam, you have on your sheet at number 8, Mitzvahs Aseh Shel Torah, L'Shmoya Trua. The Rambam in Aleph Gimel, let me ask you a shaila. If you have normally a Chefza Shel Mitzvah, but the Chefza is stolen, so it could be a problem in fulfilling the mitzvah because it's a mitzvah ba'avera. And yet the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Shofar, Parakaf Halacha Gimel, the Rambam paskins that if somebody steals the shofar and blows the shofar, yatsa, you are yotzei. Why are you yotzei? Because there's no mitzvah to blow the shofar. So there's no mitzvah in the Torah to blow the shofar. The shofar is merely the instrument used to produce the sound to allow the ear to hear it. No. It's a very good shaila. I don't mean to get really into the sugya of whether mitzvah is tekiah, but I believe there's a chazonish on that. You might need a maisa tekiah, you might need a din tekiah, and since he's not mechuyev in mitzvah, so it doesn't have a din tekiah shofar. But even so, there are other answers as well. But even so, the mitzvah is l'shmaya kol shofar. What? Yeah, but could he be might see me? In other words, could...
Yeah, because he doesn't please himself. You have the right.
Yeah, but let's say mezuzah. Let's say somebody knocks the mezuzah on the house. The mitzvah is, the hammer is just the hechsher mitzvah to get the mezuzah on the doorpost. L'chayra, the blowing of the shofar is just the hechsher mitzvah to present the sound to the ear of the listener who's chayiv in mitzvahs. So one would think then that even someone who's not chayiv in mitzvahs should be able to blow the shofar, because blowing the shofar is only hechsher mitzvah. V'haraya, the Rambam paskins, that if you steal a shofar, you could be yotzei the mitzvah of tkiyah shofar with that shofar. It's a shofar gezula. It doesn't matter. There's no mitzvah to blow. The shofar then is not the chefza shel mitzvah according to the Rambam. The shofar is like the hammer that bangs the mezuzah into the doorpost. Right? Nobody. If you steal a hammer, you could use a hammer to bang the mezuzah into the doorpost. Okay, it's similar along the same lines that this gentleman is asking, but it's a good kasha. Why can't a goy blow if it's merely the hechsher mitzvah? Okay, there are answers to it. I'm not going to get. Just I want to bring to your attention the Rambam Shita. The Rambam writes in no less than 7 places that the mitzvah is to hear the sound of the shofar. There's no mitzvah to blow the shofar. Maybe the clearest place you have on your sheet over here. It's the Chuvas HaRambam in Siman Nun Aleph. The Rambam says like this. The Rambam says, "Ma chiluk sheyesh bein l'shmaya kol shofar uvein al tkiyah shofar." What's the difference in there's machlokes rishonim? Do you make a bracha al shmiyas shofar or l'shmaya kol shofar, or do you make the bracha al tkiyah shofar? So the Rambam says there's a tremendous chiluk, because the mitzvah, the Rambam says, "Eino hatkiyah ela b'shmiyah sagi." If the mitzvah was a tkiyah, says the Rambam, if the mitzvah was to blow the shofar, then on Rosh Hashanah, everyone would be obligated to get up, go to the bima, and blow their own shofar. The same way you can't be moitzi me and wearing tefillin, because it's a mitzvah shebagufay. If there is a mitzvah to blow shofar, how could you blow shofar for me? I am mechuyev to blow the shofar. The fact that only one person blows the shofar and everybody else listens, says the Rambam, that proves conclusively the mitzvah is not to blow, the mitzvah is to listen to the sound of the shofar. And that's the conclusion of the Rambam. Therefore the Rambam says, if you blow and you put your fingers in your ears, lo yatsa. But if you hear it and you didn't blow, yatsa. Because the Rambam says the shofar is merely the tool that is used to produce the sound that allows you to be yotzei the mitzvah with the chefza shel mitzvah, you would say, of the sound. In other words, the sound would then be the chefza shel mitzvah. So the Avnei Nezer says, brilliantly, he says, making a bracha, l'shmoya kol shofar, is analogous to making kiddush on yayin. How's that? Here you're sitting at the Shabbos table, and technically speaking, you can make kiddush Friday night, you can make kiddush on the challah. But the Yevid, you can make it on the challah. Elamai, you want to do it more behidr, you want to make it on the yayin. But the challah is embarrassed. The challah is ashamed. It's like you're rejecting the challah, you're neglecting the challah. Says Avnei Nezer, you cover the challah, shelo yireh pas boishtoi, so that the challah does not see its embarrassment that you're neglecting it to make kiddush al yayin. Says Avnei Nezer, the same thing when you make the bracha l'shmoya kol shofar, you're basically relegating the shofar to a hammer. You're relegating to the shofar to merely an instrument that's used to create the sound. You're downgrading the value of the shofar. It's very embarrassing to the shofar. It's demeaning to the shofar. So what could we do? We have to, so to speak, sacrifice the preferred way of being Mekayim the mitzvah to cover the shofar, similar to what we do to Kiddush Friday night. That's the way the Avnei Nezer says it, or at least that's the way I like to say over the Avnei Nezer. You'll see for yourself. But that's the bottom line. The Rambam says very clearly, the mitzvah of Tkiyah Shofar is a mitzvah of hearing the sound of the shofar. The Maisa mitzvah is allowing the sound waves to enter your eardrum. That's the mitzvah. So I just want to bring out another dimension of the inyan of shofar from a number of different sources. And that is, we begin first with the Gemara Rosh Hashanah Daf Chavav. The Gemara is in the Shita of the Rabbanon that for a shofar has to come from a ayil, and according to Rabbanon, it cannot come from a cow. Says the Gemara, why not? Why can't the shofar come from the cow? Says the Gemara, because ein kategar nasa sanegar. Your prosecutor cannot become your defense attorney. The same way the Kohen Gadol does not do the avodah b'bigdei zahav, because as he's doing the avodah and he's trying to attain kapar for Klal Yisrael, he doesn't want to remind the Rebbeinu Shalom about the Chet HaEgel. So too, on Rosh Hashanah, when we're trying to accomplish slicha v'kapara, we're trying to attain a good judgment, we don't want to remind the Rebbeinu Shalom of the Chet HaEgel by blowing with the keren of a par, which would remind the Rebbeinu Shalom of the Chet HaEgel. Frek the Gemara, what are you talking about? Ein kategar nasa sanegar. The Kohen Gadol doesn't wear big days of. He wears big days of the whole day long. He always wears big days of, except when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So we're not so concerned about Ein kategar nasa sanegar. We're only worried about it when the Kohen Gadol goes l'fnai v'l'fnim. Says the Gemara, as far as I know, when you blow shofar, you're not blowing shofar in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Right? There's no psicha for a Tkiyah Shofar where you open up the Aron and you stuff the Baal HaTekiyah in the Aron Kodesh. There's no Tkiyah Shofar, l'fnai v'l'fnim. It's a mitzvah of shofar. It's no less than the Kohen Gadol doing the avodah the rest of the day other than the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Why then are we so concerned about Ein kategar nasa sanegar? We're only concerned about it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. To which the Gemara gives the following answer. Says the Gemara, Kiva and Dilazikareinu kibifnim dami. Since Tkiyah Shofar is to get the Rebbeinu Shalom to remember us, l'tova, it has the status of l'fnai v'l'fnim. What's found in the Gemara? What do you mean since Tkiyah Shofar is to get a good zikaron? Yeah, and what's the Kohen Gadol doing the rest of the day when he's not in the Kodesh HaKadoshim? L'chara also he's trying to achieve a certain zikaron that the Rebbeinu should remember us l'tova, and yet there's no problem of ein kategar nasa sanegar. What then is the issue with Tkiyah Shofar that kivon de l'zikareinu kelefnai v'lefnem dami? What does the Gemara mean? How is Tkiyah Shofar somehow bebechinas the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Another kasha. This kasha I saw in the Harei Kedem, Rosh Shurkin brings down that we know from the Avudraham that the words of tefillah, which were chosen by Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, it's not just Anshe Knesset Hagdolah selected and chose nice words, poetic words, beautiful words. Every expression of the tefillah comes from somewhere in Tanakh. And yet, in the bracha of Shofaris that we say in Rosh Hashanah, how does Shofaris end? Baruch Atah Hashem, Shomeya, Koil, Truas, Amoy, Yisrael, Barachamim. Shomeya, Koil, Truas, Amoy, Yisrael, Barachamim. So first of all, what do you mean Shomeya, Koil, Truas, Amoy, Yisrael, Barachamim? Who has to hear the shofar? The Rambam could not have said more times that the mitzvah is we listen to the sound of the shofar. The mitzvah of shofar is Klal Yisrael has to listen to the sound of the shofar. What do you mean the Rebbeinu Shalom is Shomeya, Koil, Truas, Amoy, Yisrael, Barachamim? I mean, does the Rebbeinu Shalom put on tefillin? Does the Rebbeinu Shalom shake lulav and esek? Yeah. Al pi medrash, al pi drush, al pi agadata, the Rebbeinu Shalom does. But is that the inyan of shofar? The inyan of shofar is Klal Yisrael needs to hear the sound of the shofar. Why are we all of a sudden drumming up that the Rebbeinu Shalom is Shomeya, Koil, Truas, Amoy, Yisrael, Barachamim? That's not the mitzvah of shofar. The mitzvah of shofar is on us. But even more, we're in Chazal, we're in Tanakh. Where is there an expression Shomeya Trua? Doesn't say that anywhere in the Chumash. Doesn't say that anywhere in Nevi'im and Ksuvim. The Rebbeinu Shalom is Shomeya Trua. So from where do Chazal lift the phrase? Every other phrase, according to Avudraham, according to Rishonim, is lifted from words of Tanakh. Where is this expression lifted? It doesn't say anywhere the Rebbeinu Shalom is Shomeya Trua. Very interesting ha'ara. Cute. I like it. The Mechaber, look at number 13. The Mechaber in Siman Tav Kuf Pei Aleph. Mechaber brings down the minhag of the Sfardim. The Mechaber says like this: Noyagim lakum ba'ashmoires loymar slichos v'tachanunim me'Rosh Chodesh Elul ve'elach. The minhag is to say slichos from Rosh Chodesh Elul and on. Very nice. So if I was the Ramah, I would say V'anu Ashkenazim ein anu noyagim came. Finished. Says the Ramah, Haggah, u'minag b'nei Ashkenaz ein oy came. Elo me'rosh chodesh ve'elach maschilin litkoya achar hatfila shachris. From Rosh Chodesh and on, we blow shofar. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Elo, we blow shofar. We do a lot of things. Okay, this is one of the things we do during this man, but it doesn't seem to be connected to it's a non sequitur. What does it have to do with the first thing the Ramah said? It's not an Elo. But the Ramah says, Vein anu noyakin. And then you could say, U'minig b'nei Ashkenaz, a separate ha'ara, a separate halacha, but the Ramah makes it sound like it's totally on what he just said. That Ashkenazim don't say slichas for the 40 days from Rosh Chodesh Elul until Yom Kippur. V'anu b'nei Ashkenaz, what do? We blow shofar. What does that have to do with anything? Another interesting ha'ara I was always bothered by. In middle of Shemona Esrei, what do they daven here? Nusach Sfard? You don't do nanuim. You don't put on your tefillin. You don't put on your talis. You don't give tzedakah. You don't do mitzvahs in middle of Shemona Esrei. That calls man v'es. Even during Chazar Hashatz, you don't do mitzvahs, right? Even during Chazar Hashatz. Chaim Kanievsky writes, Ulai, if you're maver sedra during Chazar Hashatz, it could be it's a mitzvah haba ba'aveira and you have to do it again. Chazar Hashatz is like, the Meis Mitzvah, the most unpopular zman of the day. Whatever happened to answering Baruch Haba Shema and Amen, but that's, for a different time. I'll leave that to your Rav to deal with. But you don't do mitzvahs in the middle of Shemona Esrei. So Vas Epis, in the middle of Salah Shemona Esrei, you stop, and the Baal Tekeah blows shofar in the middle of Shemona Esrei. What in the world is that? Why are we blowing shofar in the middle of Shemona Esrei? What's the inyan? So basically this idea, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, maybe we just bring out a few added ha'aros, is brought in many svarim. I saw in the Harei Kedem. I was close with, there was a Rosh Hashiva in my old neighborhood in Kew Garden Hills. His name was Rav Shlomo Warman. He was a Talmud Muvak of Reb Blazer Silver. He lived in Reb Blazer Silver's house in Cincinnati. He wrote 7 volumes at least, Shiur Yosef. Mamish Goy Natsam. He also brings down this idea with a few added ha'aros. And ultimately, I saw it traced back to the Brisker Rav. And that is, the Gemara says in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, and Daf Chaf Aleph. Says the Gemara, it's Machlokes, I believe, Tanoim, what should a shofar look like? Should a shofar be kafuf, or should a shofar be pashat? Should a shofar be bent, or should a shofar be straight? And the Gemara says Machlokes. Says the Gemara, B'mai kam iflagi, what's Machlokes Talian? Mar Savar, Rosh Hashanah, Kama Dekaya finish Daite Tfei Mali. One sheet that is on Rosh Hashanah, the more humble, the more submissive, the more humility that a person is able to express and feel and engender, the better off. Umar Savar, Kama Dekaya finish Daite Tfei Mali. The other opinion is, the straighter you are, the more yashar you are, the better off you are. Rashi says, what's the machlokes based on? Look at Rashi, look at number 15. Says Rashi, Kamo dekayif inish bitfilasai, in your tefillah. What do you mean in tefillah? We're not talking about tefillah now, we're talking about the shofar. Says Rashi, the more humble, the more bent over you are in tefillah, panav kevushin la'aretz, with your face bent down to the ground, tfeyad if it's better, mishum v'hayu eini v'libi sham. Rashi quotes the pasuk, my heart and my eyes should be there. In other words, bent over. And what does the other man Amar hold? Says Rashi. The other man Amar holds, Kama de Pashan inish daite tfei mali. Says Rashi, Mishum nisa levavenu el kapayim. You want to lift up your heart with your palms. You want to be more in an erect, straight position. So that Rashi is saying the machlokes of the image of the shofar is totally on what is the correct image to be in tefillah. Should you be bent over, humble, submissive, or should you be yashar, should you be straight? Ayoim v'noira, there's a Gemara in Yevamos Kufay Amid Beis where the Gemara brings the exact same machlokes by tefillah. And the Gemara there says, what is that machlokes based on? These two psukim. Do we say, V'haya eini v'libi sham? Should you be bent over because of the pasuk, my heart and my eyes should be there bent over? Or should you be standing straight during tefillah because of the pasuk, Nisal v'avenu al kapayim? So it's an amazing thing. Rashi is saying that the exact same psukim, that the machlokes of one's position during tefillah are tolian, those are the same psukim of what a shofar should look like. So what do you see from the way Rashi learns this Gemara? What do you see from the whole Shakla B'Tarya and Rashi? That somehow the tzura of the shofar and the image of the shofar and the way a shofar appears and the message that the shofar is carrying is parallel to a tzura of tefillah. Should a shofar somehow, which is a tool of tefillah, be submissive, humble, bent over? Or should a shofar, which is a tool of tefillah, be kayif, should be straight because of the pasuk, V'haya nisal v'avenu al kapayim? So what we see from Rashi is that aside from the fact that there's a ma'isa mitzvah of shofar, to hear the sound of the shofar, the shofar seems to be a tool of tefillah. There's an element of tefillah, there's an aspect, a facet of tefillah which the shofar is accomplishing. In other words, the shofar is a form of davening. And therefore either it should be bent over or it should be straight. But whatever tzura tefillah is, that's what a shofar should look like. So the way the Harei Kedem says it, I'm going to say it a little differently. It was the same idea. He quotes the Rambam. The Rambam says, in Parakeh, Hilchos Tefillah, Halacha Daled, V'yiyah libay panoi lamala ki'ilu hu oimed b'shamayim. That during Tefillah, a person should stand with your heart clear, empty, focused, as if you're standing in Shamayim. Or the Rambam writes also, Yira atzmoi kilu oimed lefnei ashchina. So therefore, says Harei Kedem, if shofar is a type of tefillah, and tefillah, you need to imagine yourself oimed b'shamayim, oimed lefnei hashchina. So then it's a bechina, it's a geder of lefnei v'lefnei. And Mamela, even though the Kohen Gadol could wear big days of bachutz, that's because he's not mamish oimed lefnei hashchina. But since shofar is a bechina of tefillah, and tefillah is oimed lefnei hashchina, Mamela, we have to be very careful that the shofar is not a shofar of a parah, but rather a shofar of an ayil, because shofar also has in it the concept and the facet that you're mamish oimei lefnei hashchina. I would say it a little differently, and I found in the Beis Halevi, he throws in his drashos, I'll show you. The Mechaber says differently than the Rambam. The Mechaber in Sim Tzadi Daled, very interesting halacha. I try to remind myself. It's very overlooked halacha. Everybody knows when you daven Shemona Esrei, Shulchan Aruch says, based on the Gemara, you face Eretz Yisrael, you face Yerushalayim, and the way the Shulchan Aruch says, v'yichavein lebeis kodshei hakadoshim. So one may mistakenly understand that to mean you face the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Mishnah Brura amazingly says that's not what it means. Yichavein keneged Eretz Yisrael means you face Eretz Yisrael. Yichavein keneged Yerushalayim means you face Yerushalayim. The Mishnah Brura says Yichavein lebeis kodshei hakadoshim means Yireh atzmoi keilu hu oimed beveis kodshei hakadoshim. I always try to remind myself, no matter how many times I'm constantly trying to be machaz myself, when you start Shemona Esrei, you need to imagine yourself standing in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's a halacha, according to Mishnah Brura, it's an open sif in Shulchan Aruch. With Fizeh, it comes out very beautiful. That since shofar is a gather of tefillah, and tefillah is not just oimed lefnei hashchina or oimed b'shamayim, it's ki'ilu oimed beveis kodshei hakadoshim. You're mamish lefnai v'lefnim. So of course there's an issue, there's a problem of in kategar nasa sanegar, and that's why we're very careful that the shofar has to be a shofar shel ayil and not a shofar shel para. Because the chefza of a shofar, not only is there a ma'isa mitzvah of listening to the sound of the shofar, but there's also an element of tefillah that the shofar carries with it. So I saw in Sefer Oiros Yimei Harachamim. I don't think it's available anymore. It's mamish hafla v'fela lomdus go'inus. He says he heard from Rabbi Yasher Bar Soloveitchik And then he told me he heard it b'shem the Brisker Rav, that's the Inyan in Nusach Sfard, why they blow shofar in middle of the Shlosh Shemona Esrei. It's not like tefillin. It's not like lulav. Shofar is a form of tefillah. Shofar is a chefza of tefillah. After all, it's either nisal avavinu al kapayim el kav hashamayim, or it's v'hayal eini v'li bisham. It's a type of tefillah. So we have to try to understand why do we need a new type of tefillah? What's wrong with the regular tefillah when we daven 3 times a day? There's no shortage. I mean, the machzor on Rosh Hashanah seems to be big enough. There are enough piyutim that we're not running out of ways to daven. Why all of a sudden comes Rosh Hashanah do we need to come up with a new type of tefillah? But that's the Inyan of shofar. So Fizeh, I heard from this Rabbi Warman, Zechron Levracha, the words of the Mechaber and Ramah are very beautiful. The Mechaber says that we get up from Rosh Chodesh Elul, Ba'ashmoires, to say Slichos, to say Tfilos. Says the Ramah, V'anu b'nei Ashkenaz, we don't do that. What do? We blow shofar every day. Mashmita Yitzhak Har Sinai. The answer is, shofar is also a form of tefillah. Shofar is also an offering of tefillah. It's a different type. It's different than the Sfardim Slichos, but it's also the same, along the same train of thought. Now what? Yeah, we don't say from Rosh Chodesh Elul. All the Ramah means to say is that they have this type of tefillah beginning Rosh Chodesh, and we have our type of tefillah. It's not that the Ramah is saying a random point. The Ramah is addressing very specifically what the Mechaber is saying. The Brisker Rav is medayik this idea. By the way, also, I heard from my woman, we say in the tefillos, Aresha sifaseinu yarav lefanecha. Think about the words. Aresha sifaseinu, the utterances of our lips. Yarav lefanecha. Mavin, umazin, mabid, umakshiv, lekoil, tekiyaseinu. Pasach betfila, v'siyem betekiyos. What is the Rebbeinu Shalom listening to? Is he listening to Aresha sifaseinu? Or is he listening to the tkiyos? We're going back and forth. The answer is, Hainohach, it's the same thing. The tkiyos somehow is bringing out or expressing a new type of prayer, a new type of tefillah. It's a chefza of tefillah, and that's the meaning of the tefillah, Reshes Vaseinu, Yarav Lefanecha. Brisker Rav says, I'm almost done. The Brisker Rav says, the Rambam says, the mitzvah of shofar, the lashon of the Rambam in Hilchos Tainis, is mitzvah saseh lizoik ulahariya. Good. Mitzvah saseh lizoik ulahariya. It's a mitzvah to cry out and to sound the shofar. Interesting. Lizoik ulahariya natainis. That's not what the pasuk says. The pasuk says al hatzar hatzoyer eschem v'harei oisem. V'harei oisem means you sound the truah. Where does the Rambam get lizoik? The Rambam's getting it from the pasuk. The Rambam says lizoik ulahariya, but the pasuk only says v'harei oisem. So Sefer Shailat Torah brings down from Rav Meir Soloveitchik, who heard from the Brisker Rav, that the Rambam understands that a trua is a gather of tefillah. Mamela, the Rambam's taich of the word v'harei oisem is lizoik ulahariya. So really, there are 2 dimensions of tefillah. There's you have to hear the shofar, and that's what the Rambam says 7 times. There's a mitzvah to hear the sound of the shofar. But there's another element of the mitzvah, and that is somehow shofar is an expression of tefillah. So we asked, where in Tanakh does it say the Rebbeinu Shalom is shomeya, teruah, or tkiyah? The answer is, it says shomeya tefillah, adecha kabasar yavai. The Rebbeinu Shalom we know is shomeya tefillah. Shomeya true is not any different. We're basically paraphrasing the Lashon Akra, the Lashon of the Pasuk. We know we have precedent, the Rebbeinu from the Shomeya Tefillah. Because since Shofar is a gather of Tefillah, it's correct for Anshin Nazadullah to utilize the expression of Shomeya Tras Amma Yisrael Baracham. So the Shaila is, Hamibli Ein Tefillah is Rosh Hashanah, that we need a new type of tefillah. I think most people would say we have enough tefillah. We don't need to invent a new type, a new form of tefillah. So the Beis Halevi himself, and the Drashas Beis Halevi, it's basically all of this, Brisker Torah, many, many generations. You could trace it back like 5 generations of, I'm not a Brisker, but it's Emes Amitai. Beis Halevi says in Drush Tezvav, What's the reason you need shofar shel ayil? Said in kateganas sanegar. You're lefnai v'lefnim. By the way, the lesson of the Beis Halevi is you're oimei beveis kodesh hakadoshim. Says the Beis Halevi, when you're lefnai v'lefnim, we have to be so careful for in kateganas sanegar. So here you have a yid. He's davening. There are 1,000 pages in his machzor, and he says every piyut and every word. The Rebbe Shalom says, what tool are you using to express your tefillos? Your mouth? That peh? You're using your mouth? What did you use your mouth for this year? B'roiv devarim lo yechtal pesha. How many different types of chatam the Chavetz Chaim brings down? Roiv chatam arba dibur. You just have to look at the laundry list of the Al-Chetz. Ruba deruba are for chet hadibur. The rest of the year we're not so concerned. The rest of the year is lav dafka, we're oimei beveis kodesh hakadoshim on the same level as Rosh Hashanah. But on Rosh Hashanah, where it's a form of tefillah, which is kivan de lezikareinu kilefnai v'lefnim dami, and we're mamish oimeid in the kodesh hakadoshim. So we have to bypass the one area of our personality, of our metzios, which might raise a lot of red flags. And that is, I call it quadruple bypass. You got to bypass your voice box, your teeth, your tongue, your palate. All of the Maitzoi Adibor need to be bypassed. The Beis Halevi says, what is shofar? Shofar is tefillah me'umka deliba. We always know tefillah is avadatem, right? Ezehu tefillah shebelev. Have I is that tefillah? Tefillah is always avodah shebelev. It's not avodah shebepeh. It's avodah shebelev, which is expressed through the peh. The concept of shofar, says the Beis Halevi, it's a way to bypass the big day zahav of the peh. It's a way to bypass the egel of the peh. The peh is the biggest indictment against the person on a Yom Hadin. No question. And therefore, says the Beis Halevi, comes the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, and the Rebbe Shalom is reviewing the ledger, scrutinizing the ledger. Kol echa v'echa b'ay lefanav kivnei maraim. And every dibor, Chavetz Chaim writes, in 1 minute you could speak 200 devarim. 3 minutes of Lashon Hara is a lot to make up for. 3 minutes of Sheker, Chanufa, Chavetz Chaim with so many chatam. But Meila and Rosh Hashanah, we're so afraid, we're so fearful, we have so much yira to utilize the Moitzoi Hadibor, and therefore we have to bypass it. We have to allow the tefillah me'umka deliba to be projected through a different instrument, to be projected through the shofar.
So according to that, why wouldn't the other people let everyone keep the flow? Why is it
Lefi this Inyan, so then why doesn't everyone have to do it? I once heard that Lefi this Inyan, this is an Inyan of tefillah, you could have a gather of Shemei HaKa'ina. What? You heard? Okay, so just one last point. The Brisker Rav comes back, and the Brisker... What?
They say
He didn't be a shlich tzibur. Yes, the Rabbi is saying also, he's representing, when it comes to tefillah, you can have a representative of the whole tzibur to represent everyone the tefillah. Yeah, in fact, the Ben Ish Chai writes from the Arizal that the Shtil Shemona Esrei is not so powerful. Mamela, we're very afraid of it, so we have to say it quietly. But the tefillah of the tzibur is much more powerful, and we're not worried about the mekatrigim. So it could be this is, okay. Comes the Brisker Rav, and says the Brisker Rav, this is what Bilam is so jealous of. Bilam is very jealous that Klal Yisrael is zoicha to this, yes, Umay Toyim have tefillah, and the Beis Hamikdash is Kivesi Beis Tefillah Chol Ha'amim, and Rosh is Mekabel the Tshuva of Ninveh. But this form of tefillah, this has never been given to the Goyim, and this is something that echoes Bilam. This is what really bothers Bilam. Why does Klal Yisrael deserve this form of tefillah? And Brisker Rav says as well, this is why Moshe Rabbeinu calls out, Ki mi goy gadol, asher lo yalekim kroivim elav. That yes, all the Ummah Yisraelim have a gather of tefillah, but only Klal Yisrael is privy to this elevated form of tefillah, of the tefillah of a shofar. Just as one very simple question. Why is that? either tefillah works or it doesn't work. If Umayis Ha'olam have tefillah, then why wouldn't they be given the tefillah of Shofar? Well, what's an afkamina? The Goyim Kadaven, the Beis Hamikdash is Beis Tefillah Yikari L'Chol Amen. Ninveh, they do tshuva. Rebbe Shlomo's Makabel, the tefillahs of Goyim. So okay, Bilam's jealous. They don't have this type of tefillah. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Kimi Goy Goda Shalei Kim Kroim Alav Gashmali B'Chol Karei Noi Love. That's koilel, even the tefillah of Shofar. But why don't the Umayis Ha'olam have this gather of tefillah? So I believe the reason is because think about what type of tefillah this is. Tzadok HaKohen writes a similar idea. Saw it quoted Reb Chaim Vital also. Beis Halevi says these words: the tefillah of the shofar is the tefillah me'umka deliba. It's the deepest expressions of the yearning of the neshama. So let's go into the neshama. Let's see, Taka, what are the deepest expressions of the yearning of the neshama? So when it comes to a Yid, we know Ribbono Shel Olam Ritzoneinu La'asos Ritzonecha. The deepest recesses of the heart of the Yid are the yearning and the pining to come close to Ribbono Shel Olam. Elamayu mima'akev sa'ar shebeisa b'shibud malchiyos. But the deepest recesses of the desires of a Yid are the umka deliba of Ritzoneinu La'asos Ritzonecha. Memela, we bypass everything else, and if the shofar is just an expression of the umka deliba of a Yid, this is the expression of the truest, deepest identity of a Yid. Masha'en kein the Umayis Ha'olam. You want to know of us titzach, the umka delibam. Malei taiva, malei machshavos zaros. They don't have this idea of Ritzoneinu La'asos Ritzonecha. They're not the same level of Chilek Elokam Imal as Ribbono Shel Olam. They're not Bonim Atem Hashem Elokeichem. Memela, what Bilam was so jealous of, and what Moshe Rabbeinu was pointing out the unique status of, is who is like Klal Yisrael. How do we see the greatness of Klal Yisrael? Because when you stick the shofar in the mouth of the Yid, and the deepest desires of the Yid comes forth, Me'umka deliba, that's something that only a Yid could express, and that is the mitzvah of Tkiyah Shofar, which is the unique mitzvah that really represents the greatness of Klal Yisrael. I just want to add one more point. If Shofar is together tefillah, so we know there's different types of tefillahs. And vice versa, you always end off with a Hallel. Remember, you have Tkiyah, Trua, Tekiyah. What's Tekiyah? Hallelujah b'seika shofar. A Tekiyah is a Hallel, is a Shvach. A Trua is Genuchei Ganach Yululei Yolal. Memela, the tefillah is also patterned after L'olam Yisader Adam Shivchai Shel Makam V'Achar Kach Yispalel. But it's really a completely enhanced and elevated understanding in the midst of Tkiyah Shofar, which really brings out the godless of the Neshama of a Yid. Interesting, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz writes that the mitzvah of Tkiyah Shofar is to commemorate the original Tkiyah Shofar. What was the original Tkiyah Shofar? The first blowing. What was the first blowing? The blowing that happened on Rosh Hashanah. What was it? Vayipach biyapov nishmas chayim. Says the Zohar, the Rebbe was a Baal Toikeya. Memela, every Tkiyah Shofar is reminiscent of the godless of the Neshama that the Rebbe imbued in every Yid on the day of Rosh Hashanah when the Rebbe gave us our Neshama. And it's a very elevated appreciation in the midst of Tkiyah Shofar. Thank everybody for listening. I thank the department for extending me the invitation. Thank the Marda Asra, of course. And I wish everybody a Gaben Shiur, Ksivach Simatova.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.